had here. But in 1803, you really couldn't read. I forgot that. So I'll tell you about what we're doing here. Here's the contract that we're going to sign. I'm hoping that you'll all sign on to be a Voyager. This is a perfect time to be a Voyager this year. I'll tell you a secret. Simon McTavish just died this summer. Okay, so the Northwest Company, all around here, and the XY Company, which were now rivals, have merged. And I'll tell you what, if you sign up now, you'll get a good slot in the brigade. Otherwise, all these companies that have merged, there aren't going to be as many fur trade brigades coming up, and you might not get a slot. What's nice about being on a fur trade brigade is there's actual money. I have money. I can pay you today. I can pay you because in that economy, there's not a lot of cash. It is awfully nice to have a little cash for the farm, for your medical bills, make sure the wife has something as you're going to be gone for about 5 months. So think about this. This is a really good deal. Bonjour, or bonjour. It's really nice to have a second language. And another one of the advantages of being a Voyager, you get to experience a whole different culture. And here's that poster again that I told you about. This is what we're looking for. People who can work for, paddle for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, for about 6 weeks all the way out, and about 6 weeks coming back. That's not too bad. That's probably even less than you work on the farm. I don't know. You also portage, and that's 2 90-pound packs at a time. We'll talk about that in a minute. It says, strong adventurous people wanted, but swimmers need not apply. Okay? There's 2 career tracks. You could be a winterer if you really like that, and that will tell you a little bit about being a winterer, but you could also be, just go out from Montreal out to the Grand Portage and back, and that's the 5-month possibility. You get 400 leave. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cash money, and sometimes you get paid in even a couple of other things, like you get paid a shirt and pants, you get tobacco, you get a couple of knives. It's really a good deal. 1% of your wages will be donated to the old and infirm, because every now and then, the Voyagers who have lumbago or a bad back or a bad shoulder from some of the things that happen on the brigades, or some of them who drown, their wives get a little bit of a pension. This is what we're going to be doing. And I want you to notice that the guy in the front is standing, okay? But that's the gouvernet, that's one of the avant. The guy in the back, oops, it isn't working anymore. In the back is also standing, but most of you will be milieu. So you'll be sitting, or you'll be on your knees most of the time for this voyage. And you take a look at the number of people that are in the canoe. You probably won't switch sides, from one side to the other. You'll be on that same left side all the way out and all the way back. This is the contract that we signed. I know that you can't read, and this one's in French besides, but I have the English version if you'd rather have it in English. It will be read to you. And there are a couple of places where they point out that this is how much you earn right here. This is who are the parish that you're coming from or where you're going to, and you will sign with an X, because you can't read, you probably can't write either. There are positions in the canoe, and there are several different things that you could do. Now, we already have the guide for this one. That one gets the most amount of money, and so do the devant and the gouvernet. They get the most of money because they have some specialized skills that in reading the water, making sure that the canoe is steered properly, and they're also responsible for carrying the canoe, but they're looking for a lot of milieu. Okay, the middlemen. And so there's a lot of need for them, 6 to 10 for each canoe. It would be a good thing. And if you are a singer, they will pay extra for the person who sings to keep the pace going. You know that we paddle about a beat or a paddle stroke a second. For hours, for about an hour, and we'll explain that one a little bit, but the singer keeps that pace going, and we'll try that out kind of a little toward the end to see if you are, see how it feels to move along a little bit. Also, if you are a cook, it's important to have good nutritious food, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's on the menu in a minute. Pork eaters, if you're just going from Montreal to the Grand Portage, you're a pork eater. If you're going to go over the winter, you'll get a lot more money. But pork eaters are paid about $400 leave, and you can get up to a third of it in advance. If you need money for the farm, if you need money to pay your medical bills, something like that. You won't necessarily get paid in leave because that's old money now after the French Revolution. They minted new money. And so you might get paid in any currency. Napoleon's a Spanish conquest. You might get paid in even American dollars. You'll also get shirt and trousers because they wear out. They're pretty rough. You get a 2.5-point blanket, carrots and tobacco, a knife, and just enough to get you going. 2 meals a day are included, yes.
It's a 2.5-point blanket. How heavy it is?
Look at the little things on the side. Those are the points. And the points give you how large the blanket is. So that will be a good one for sleeping on, or keeping you warm on some of those kind of cool nights. There's 2 meals a day, breakfast and supper. We don't stop for lunch because the canoe needs to keep going. So we have breakfast and supper, and I should explain that the breakfast, by the way, we'll have supper. We make a huge pot of pea soup, and we only eat half of it. They save the other half in the morning so that you've got food ready to go, but we don't even eat right away in the morning. Get up, pack the canoe, get on the water, and after a pipe or two, and a pipe is about an hour's long paddle, and you get a chance to smoke your pipe, 2 of them, another hour, chance to smoke your pipe. About that time, they will sort of come ashore, bring the kettle. They hope too that if you are, that they don't have any portages early in the morning, or if they do have portages early in the morning, that will mean that they maybe will eat a little earlier, so they don't have to carry a full or a half a pot across the portage. So it sort of depends on what time you eat, depends on where you are on the route. But don't expect breakfast very early. Breakfast is, as I said, pea soup. Lunch is pea soup. It's pea soup a day for 6 weeks. Except maybe if we get rhubarb in the middle. Oops, too many of them. There we go. You have enough time right now to carve your own paddle. And you would much rather do this than have to pay the company a leave for their paddle, because you will make it the way you want. Now, you would need to know that if, as a meal, you only need a short paddle, but it's going to be narrow. It's not going to be nearly as wide as some of those other paddles, and it's not going to be nearly as long. But think about how you want the grip, because you might like your grip to be a little offset. We're going to be paddling in a canoe that is about 40 feet long, about 6 feet wide. 2 people next to each other. So if you're signing up, you might want to think about who it is that you're signing up with, because if you're signing up, you'd like to know who's on your side, you know, that they're a little bit thoughtful about who it is that you're paddling with. Maybe now the guide and the bowman will decide who sits where, because some of that is dependent on your strength, your height. And by the way, most of you are going to be a little bit on the tall side. If you are over 5 feet 5 inches tall, it's a little iffy. If you're taller, it's hard to get you into the canoe. So if you're shorter than 5 feet 5, that's a real plus. This is all of what's going in the canoe. That canoe that was empty, this is all of the things that are full. These are your personal packs, and you get 40 pounds of personal pack, and that includes your blanket. It includes maybe another pair of shoes, a little bit of money, your knife, your tobacco, your pipe, but you have to carry it, every bit of it, across the portage. And so after a while, 40 pounds might be more than you need. We also have 60 bales of cargo, and that's really the reason we're going. We're doing cargo on the way out. Bringing cargo out, bring pelts on the way back. But there are barrels, and some of that's food, some of it's high wine, some of it's gunpowder, and there are all kinds of things, fancy things in here. There's sets of guns. These are long setting poles. And if you notice that right at the top here, whoops, I can't make it work. At the bow of the canoe and in the stern, there are very, very long paddles. Sometimes they don't use a paddle. Sometimes they use a setting pole, and that's just like upstream. Instead of paddling upstream, they pole upstream. So the bowman and the sternman plant that pole to help you go where you want it to go. The rest of the milieu are paddling with all their might. And there are some canoe supplies right in the middle here. Pots, some extra birch bark for repair. Okay, you'll be responsible for 6 of those bales, each one of you. Plus your own pack, plus your blanket, paddle, a few miscellaneous extras. Each one of these is 90 pounds. And the way you carry it is by putting a tump line over your forehead and kind of attaching it around the back. And that way you can carry 2 of these at one time. Because 6 of them looks like this. Now some of you probably can carry 3 of them at one time. But you don't have to. We generally make 3 trips across the portage, and so you only have to do 2 at one time. Sometimes those 60 bales include, as I said, high wines, and they also weigh about 90 pounds each. That's been determined the weight that a Voyager can carry, 2 of them. And you can see that this year we're taking 34 barrels of high wine. It's changed. So we get started, and we're going to be starting the early part of the end of May, almost as soon as the ice is out of the rivers. They'll let us know when the ice is out of the rivers in the northern climates where they're coming from, and as soon as we know that the ice is out, we'll be taking off. The first thing that we start, we stop not so far out of Montreal, and there's a little chapel there. And we stop there to put a few pennies, a few cents in the alms box, and to ask for prayers. Accommodations, I should tell you, by the way, these guys are lucky. They're sleeping under the canoe, but mostly what goes under the canoe is going to be the cargo. We need to keep that dry at all costs, because if it gets wet, and there are some things that get wet, they get heavy. And you have to carry that across the portage. It's not any fun. Whoops. Paddling upstream. Okay, paddling upstream for the first 5 weeks of our trip. And what you have to know is going upstream is a little bit tricky. You don't see any on this one, but sometimes there are canoe paddles lashed together, and that shows that one of our canoe mates didn't make it. It's also a lot of water coming down, and it's pretty cold. At a rapids, the steersmen decide, can we paddle it, or can we tow it? And if you can see what they're doing, these men are towing the canoe. Now, they have a nice path this time. You don't always get a nice path. Sometimes you're wading in the water, and that water is cold, as I said, and some of those rocks are kind of slippery with moss. So you really have to go and get a good footing. You're not wearing boots probably. You may be wearing moccasins, and you may have 2 or 3 pairs, because once a pair of moccasins gets wet, they get cold for a long time. Sometimes the canoe gets totally unloaded, and then we have to portage all of the material as well. Sometimes they just do part of it. They decide how much water there is and what the rock the water condition and the river condition, and then we know if we have to carry or tow or paddle. So they're deciding, you can see that they're going up a portage path here. It'll be about 5 weeks, and this is the route that we're taking. We'll start here in Montreal or Lachine, and this is about where CSAHS is, and we take the Ottawa River. It's called the Grand River for most of us. We take the Ottawa River, and each one of these blue words, which you can't read anyway, are known terrible portages. Some of them are 2 or 3 day portages to get across. After a while, the Ottawa River goes north, but we don't. We follow the west, and we go to the Mattawa River and Lake Nipissing. Okay, portaging. And I want to explain a little bit more about portaging because everything is on your knees and your back. And it's our least favorite thing. Most of the time it's easier to do it when we're all paddling together. That's an easier task than having to carry 2 of them on our backs. So here's how portages are done. And this is the famous Grand Portage off Lake Superior. It's about 9 miles long. So you're going to take the first pack of things and go a half a mile. At half a mile, you'll drop your 2 packages and you'll go back to the place and get your second set of 2 packages and bring them to the half a mile staging point. Coming back probably feels like a vacation because you don't have anything on your back. You go back for your 3rd set, but instead of stopping here, you go on to the 1 mile. You carry that 1 mile. Okay, now you go back from the 1 mile to your half a mile and go up and you carry your second set of bales, and then you carry your 3rd set of bales to the 1 mile part, and you keep staging them a half a mile at a time. And because we're pork eaters, we have an extra item in our contract, and I better tell you about it so that you're not surprised. Your contract requires you to carry over the Grand Portage 8 loads. More, and if you carry more, you can get a Spanish dollar. So think about that. It's a good deal, but it's tough. On the way back from here, Fort Charlotte, you'll be carrying the winter's pelts. And those guys don't have the same kind of 90-pound weight things, so they just pile a pack of pelts, and I bet they're a lot heavier. Those pelts weigh tons. There are 36 known portages and 36 known discharges between Lachine and Lake Huron. At Lake Nipissing, we now start heading downstream. It doesn't look like much, although it looks kind of messy. This is the French River, and it's about 75 miles. Now, we might have made about 300 miles in 5 weeks. We're going to make 75 miles in 1 day, so pay attention. It goes really fast, and you cannot afford to be taking even hardly a breath. The other thing is, to stay ahead of the stream, to stay ahead of the current, you're going to be paddling not just regular time, you may be paddling double time or triple time to keep in control of where the canoe goes. And from there, the French River pulls out here. We'll go through the north channel of Georgian Bay up to Sault Ste. Marie. Sault is a waterfall. And from Sault Ste. Marie, we all the way to Grand Portage. Okay, that part of the trip is the one where you see all the Voyagers paddling easily. You don't see them with the part where they're doing all of the hard work with portaging. But that's the part that you really, all of the pictures that you've had, that's what you probably know of. It will take about, from this distance to here, about 2 weeks. The other distance, about 5 weeks, when they're going on the rivers and upstream. It's much easier. But there are some things that are pretty tricky. We hug the shores because it's still, we don't want to get out there in the really big waves. And Lake Superior is known to be dangerous. One of the things it does is fogs up. And then we don't know which direction we're going. And sometimes You don't want to be paddling the wrong direction, so we have to wait until the fog lifts before we can take off. The rendezvous is a Grand Portage, okay? Until 1802, because right after that, well, after the 7 Years' War, the English won, and all of a sudden now there's this Revolutionary War with the colonies, and they're starting to pay attention to the fact that a lot of furs, a lot of money is going out of is being drained from their economy. And they have decided to start charging customs and duties, and they're aware of it. So now Grand Portage had to get moved from Grand Portage up to Canada, where it is safe for the fur companies to operate and not have to pay taxes. At the rendezvous, we'll be switching canoes, and those 36-foot canoes will go back to Montreal, and you might too if you're a pork eater, or you could go on and be a winterer. And the smaller kind of canoes, the North Canoe, is about 25 feet long. This is about what would fit in one of the smaller canoes. It's still dangerous on the small waters, even though you're not on the big seas like Lake Superior. Whoops. What's tricky is to find the route in between where's the current going, and so sometimes you'll throw up a little bit of grass and see if it's moving along here, just figure out where the current is moving along the Voyagers Highway, which is what they call those northern waters. And again, it's even harder sometimes to portage or décharge, because you still have narrow rivers, and now as it gets later in the season, there's less water, and so there's even more chances that you're going to have to portage. But it's a good life. I could carry, paddle, walk, and sing with any man I ever knew. I have been 24 years a canoeman and 41 years in service. No portage was ever too long for me. 50 songs could I sing. I have saved the lives of 10 voyageurs. I've had 12 wives and 6 running dogs. I spent all my money in pleasure. Were I young again, I would spend my life the same way over. There's no life as happy as a voyager. Yes. And here are some of those guys that you're going to be going with. 3 Pierre Pielters in the same brigade. Can you imagine? Pierre, do this. Pierre, which one? And the Valois brothers. If you like, if that would be a good group to get with, if you could be in their canoe. And here's Louis Devant, or Louis Peltier. Has been a Devant and a Gouverneur. He's a high quality guy. So these are some of the guys that you might be in the canoe with if you sign up soon. And now it's a chance for you to see how well you would do. This is a song, and we're going to sing a little bit of it. And then at a certain point, I want you to move a little bit faster. Okay, so get your paddles up, all of you. Get your paddles up, okay? And we're singing, Viva la, viva la, viva l'amour, viva la, viva la, viva l'amour, viva l'amour, viva l'amour, viva la company. Let every good fellow now join in our song. Viva la company, success to each other and pass it along. Viva la company, faster. Viva la, viva la, viva l'amour, viva la, viva la, viva l'amour, viva l'amour, viva l'amour, viva la company. Okay, you have an idea? And now a few fun facts about voyageurs here. Both sides were actually satisfied. Sometimes you might think that the voyageurs got the better end of the deal, but both sides felt that they had made a better deal. So you could either think that a knife was worth nothing, or beads were worth nothing, but both of them thought that they had a better deal. And one of the interesting things about the beaver pelt was that the better ones were the ones that had been used for a year. In other words, you'd slept on, if you were an Indian and you'd slept on that beaver pelt for a year, wrapped it around you. It takes off the long guard hairs. This is a beaver pelt. And the hat makers who wanted that one had to pluck every one of those long guard hairs out by hand. So if they were worn off by an Indian sleeping on it, it was a better deal. Whoops. Here's another one, that the first Americans were actually pretty thoughtful customers in here. They, you know, a handful of beads was a gift, and they understood the difference between gifts and the things that they needed, but they didn't actually get a lot of, they didn't get a full set of cookware like we might get. They might need one pot, and only when the pot had a hole in it would they get another pot. Whoops. Okay. Yeah. Okay. One of the things that's interesting is the Hudson Bay Company, which was formed in 1670, still operating today. You think about all the companies that are here for a year or two or three, and all of a sudden now the 1670, and it's still operating. It started a new form of commerce, and if you think about Hudson Bay, actually built all big posts on the Hudson Bay, wanted all of their customers to come to them, which was 1,500, 1,000 miles to bring their furs. And if they had not gotten, the ships can't really get into the Hudson Bay until late July, August, and so you had to time it right. You had to have food along the way. You were traveling across other kinds of Indian territories, some of them not necessarily friendly to you, and so it was a lot harder. And the French Canadians discovered that they used what I would call the Tupperware model. In other words, they brought the goods not only to the Indian tribes, but then they said, try it out. Here, I'll give you credit. You tell me what you want. Here, I'll show you how this gun works. You take gun, you take the shot, here's how it works. And come back in February with some pelts, and you'll have it. It wasn't at all how the English worked, and so the French model absolutely blew the Hudson Bay Company out of the water for many years. It was a pretty tough rival.
Nick, you missed daughters in the, go back, you missed daughters. 4 back.
Okay.
That's right.
We have Daughters of the American Revolution, which is one of those things that we're relatively proud of. There's actually something that predates that by about 100 years in France, and that was called the Daughters of the King. It was mostly a colony of soldiers with a few farmers and a few other people to make the colony work, but they didn't have very many women. So way back in 1663, the king instituted a program where they would give a woman free passage and they would give her a dowry. It doesn't sound like much, but some of those dowries included soap or pins or stockings. And for a person who was maybe an orphan, whose family had no money to make a dowry, and cash was pretty tough to come by in that economy, to have a dowry, to have things of your own was pretty powerful. The women who came were often married within a few weeks, but if their husband died, they were married to again and again, because that was such an important thing to have women in the colony. Okay.
Aren't you a member?
Yes. Map making, and one of the things that I love about this map is that they didn't really know where they were going, and so they were sure, here's the Mississippi River right up here, and they are sure that it goes way north of Lake Superior, and that's one of the reasons that they have a little problem with the fur trade, is because they are sure that the Mississippi River goes that far north, they can use that to get their furs back down. But when they actually get map making, accurate map making, and surveying done, they discover that no, it doesn't do that at all. And all their fur posts are actually on the wrong side of the line, which now Thomas Jefferson is starting to pay attention to quite a bit more seriously. The pork eaters actually faced a fair amount of discrimination. For hundreds of years. The Ku Klux Klan targeted them at different times. And what we think about is the Ku Klux Klan operating in the South against black people. They're operating here against Catholics. And the people weren't given a very many opportunities for good jobs or education for many, many years, even into the 1950s. Okay, your turn to pay attention. If you are going to be a winterer, you would want to know which trade goods are the most important. And so you can kind of look at what might be in the shop and think about it. Okay, so we have metal tools and utensils, or we have fabric and twine, fancies, trade silver, oh, shots, guns, alcohol and tobacco. Okay, your turn to guess. What do you think is powerful? What do you think were the most important products that they had? Yep, good guess. Gunpowder was important, but it's actually not the most powerful one. Anything else?
Alcohol.
Which one?
Alcohol.
The one that we all see, yep, getting bigger and bigger. Even that doesn't account for the largest amount that they carried.
Trade,
Which one?
trade good? The trade good?
Trade goods. It's one of the trade goods, and it is fabric. Fabric was the thing that, because leather gets wet and it's heavy, fabric dried fast, and so fabric of all different kinds, shirts, pants, you know, even uniform clothes that were given as gifts, or blankets, things that they would make of their own, that was probably the most powerful thing. And so fabric, 60% of what was in their trade good, in their bales. Metal tools and utensils, 25%, you know, like pots and pans and, you know, knives, awls. Alcohol and tobacco, as difficult as that particularly was, 10%. And fancies, you know, the gifts that would be, something that would make you happy. I want to tell you 3 short stories about my connection into the fur trade. One of them is the town that I grew up is Big Fork, Minnesota. And in that one, this is Bill Hoffman. Bill Hoffman is one of the first white people who decided to make canoes. He wanted to know how they were made. His very first one he made with the white side out. And he discovered that that side picks up a lot more water. And so he learned to make the tan side out. But he actually made canoes for a number of years. There are some of his canoes in the Smithsonian. If you have been to the Minneapolis or the St. Paul Museum, his canoe is there. His canoe is at the Snake River Post, and one up in Grand Portage. Yes.
What kind of bark? Tree.
Birch trees, of course. Yes.
I have one.
You too? Wow. I would love to see that. I was one of the first Girl Scout Voyagers. In way about 1963, they decided that this is a good thing to have people go out there, and so I was one of the first crews that went. And I don't know if you're aware of the size of paddling groups right now, but maybe 6 would be a larger group. We were 24. We were 12 canoes. Can you imagine fitting 12 canoes? And it was before any of the other kinds of ways to be really careful about the environment. We didn't know about all kinds of things, and so, but we were able to use the water there without filtering it to drink. It was a different time. And I am descended from Voyagers as well. This is my great-great-grandfather, and I have a short story to tell you about him. This is the son of, okay, so his father was the Voyager, but there are no pictures of his father. He came, he was the younger son of a large family, and when his father discovered that there wasn't going to be enough land for his sons to live in the Lachine area, he said, well, there's some good land out there where there's Minnesota. And so he told his son to take one of the trips, and he came out along here. He probably came through the Boundary Waters and down the Mississippi River, saw the great St. Anthony Falls, which is fabulous, and it's not there right now. And he came to the confluence where the Father of Waters and the St. Pierre, which is what we call the Minnesota River, came together. And he was describing that part of land, because the land that he had found was not that far away. His father said to him, I know that place. There's some caves there. And there are some caves on the Minnesota River. He said there's some caves there, and during some Indian trouble, a companion and I were forced to hide. For 3 days, a woman from the tribe brought us food in the dead of night. And then after 3 days, the Indian trouble subsided and we were able to escape. I'm like, oh, cool. Probably a book for. Oops. I have just a little bit to read to you. This is from the Chronicles of an Unlikely Voyager. It's a boy who's been educated, and so it's one of the reasons he's unlikely. And he doesn't know much about his family, except that he knows that he's sort of different. He has been in a fight with somebody. Other boys who are now working have pelted him with snowballs, and he feels pretty mad about this. So he is going home thinking, I'm going to tell my parents.
How old?
He is 12 in this one. Well, they wouldn't sneer at him anymore. He would quit his lessons, even the ones he enjoyed. He would stagger to the cottage under an immense load of wood. He would carry Bertha's wash water. The minute he got into the cottage, he would tell his parents what he had decided. His eyes snapping and his jaw firm, he passed the gate and he started down the short path to the doorway. Supper would be waiting. Papa would be smoking his pipe by the fire, Mama knitting, and the table laid for a meal. He opened the door. Something was wrong. His parents were in their usual places, it was true. But Papa wasn't smoking. Mama wasn't knitting. They sat still, stiff, as if something had frightened them. Their faces showed shock and worry. Shut the door, Papa said. Although Andre had already shut it, he hung his coat on the hook behind the door and came to the fire. He looked from one parent to another. Something had happened. What? His father spoke. We have had a letter. A letter. This was strange indeed. As far as Andre had known, the Didiers had never had a letter, nor had any of his classmates in the village. Papa went on in grave tones. We have been waiting for you to tell us what it says. They don't read. There the letter lay, a square of white, as if he feared to touch it. The blob of red sealing wax bore a fancy crest pressed into it, hands trembling with excitement. Andre picked it up, wondering. He put his finger under the seal to open it. The crisp, heavy paper crackled as he unfolded it. On a single page was the same crest embossed in gold. The writing was clear, flowing like the writing Father Bouffant had so patiently taught him. He read it out loud. Are there more questions? What's next? Yeah.
The canoes that they built, were they meant to last many years, or were they kind of falling apart by the time a season was done?
That's a really good question. Some of they have now a canoe that's lasted for 300 years, but I think most of them would have been made it for about 3 or 4 years. I think what I learned is a canoe would cost about $100, which would be a fair amount of money. And they could get the canoe, they'd repair the canoe with a number of different things. Every day after they've been on a harder, any kind of thing, the canoe is also leaked.
Like tar or something they mended it with?
Yep, they would use a mixture of tar, and they bring it with them. They brought wrapping of spruce root, which was what they sewed it with, and so they could take out a piece if they had hit a rock of some kind, and so they could repair a piece and sew something else back in, glue it. Yes. Other questions?
Why would swimmers not need a plan?
If you were good at swimming, you would save your own neck. If you were not good at swimming, you would understand that there's no chance to save your own neck. You might as well save the cargo. And that's really all the company cared about, is getting that cargo out and back. So, it was kind of a negative thing. If you learned how to swim, you were a rare person. Other questions?
You have your books for sale.
I do. I have books for sale.
How much?
I think that I have it even up here. Oops. Nope. 12 bucks today.
How much is 400 leave rates?
Boy, is that really hard to tell. And I've been working on that one, and I'll continue to work on it, and I'll actually write about that in my blog when I get an answer, because it's different in today's money. But I'm thinking that 400 leave. Well, what I think of is it's really not very much money. I'm going to say, let's say $25 maybe, and I'm just making that up right now. I think that they got paid better than the Hudson Bay men, who got paid like, for their 400, they would get like 25 leave for the same thing. But because the money changed right after the French Revolution, and they reconfigured what everything did, it's really, I can get almost no answer for that one. I'll keep working on it though. What is your name?
Dan?
Dan? I'll work on it. When I get an answer, I'll let you know.
Nikki, I assume that they went like all spring and summer into the fall, multiple trips, right?
No.
No?
So one trip would get them from about 6 weeks to the rendezvous. So they start sometime in the end of March, end of May. They will get to the rendezvous the early part of July. In July, the fur company proprietors, or the owners of the bourgeois, had a company meeting, and so some of them were wintering partners, and they would be out in the field working, and they would come in for their fancy meeting. But they would determine all the company business at that point during the month of July. Then sometime in July, at the end of July, the canoes would go out. The wintering canoes would go back to their posts. The procreator canoes would go back to Lachine and Montreal. That took about 5 weeks, and they would get back to Lachine, I'm going to say sometime in October. Sometimes they were asked to do a run to Rainy Lake, and that would be another 2 weeks out and another 2 weeks back, and that would, put them longer. So that would get them home in October. It's getting pretty cold by that time. Good question. Another one.
How long did these people live, the Voyagers?
The one who
50 was old?
50 was old for some of them, but the one who said it's been on 75 years. I know. Can you imagine the food? What it does to your knees or your rheumatism or anything, your back. I cannot imagine how it would work for them. I have goods here for you to look at. This is what the Indians would have brought or given to them, and this is what some of the fur trade on the other side would have had available for them, as trade. It's really hard to get some of the things that I really want, like the pot, but anyway, yes.
Maybe you talked about it at the beginning and I missed it, but your sash that you have on, that indicated their role?
Panache.
How much status?
Only that it helped you. It was a little bit of something for your kidneys, a support for your kidneys maybe. It could also, if your tump line broke, you could use it as to tump line, but it was mostly because their lives were so drab, and they would not have had much color in 6 weeks. Every bit of color in their shirt would have been pretty much ragged and whatever. So the sash or the red plume, and this is the proof that you were a winterer. If you made it over one winter, you had the right to wear an ostrich plume. Okay, I have money, I have more contracts. Sign up today. Thank you.
So okay, I'll ask a dumb question. Merci beaucoup is French, but what's the miigwech? What
So
language
merci
is that?
beaucoup is French for thank you very much. Miigwech is Ojibwe for the same. Thank you very much. Miigwech.
Wow.